right, it's good to be back in South Florida, or sort of Florida at least, sort of, kind of, even though I'm in LA right now. But welcome, Mike, to the Leaders Who Care series.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be with you here.
Yeah, it's great to see you, and catch up a little bit and have some laughs. And we're just talking about hurricanes and tornadoes and wonderful positive subjects like that.
Perfect comedy material, yes.
Yeah, I know it's crazy, but that's just tells you got to enjoy every minute as much as possible, and because you never know what'll happen. So I'm really glad you're here and sharing some of the great stuff you've done and you're doing. And can we start by briefly introducing yourself? Just like where you're from, a little bit about your family, something you've never told anybody you want to reveal now, maybe stuff like that, and then we'll get into the business stuff as we go along. How's that?
It sounds great. Other than I talk to so many people about so much stuff, I'm not sure there's anything left that I can say there. No one ever has heard this before, but let me take a shot at it. So, Mark, as you know, I'm Canadian, born in Vancouver, but grew up all over Canada and outside of Canada because I was born into a military family. My father was a chaplain, became the chaplain general. So my sister and I had I'd say a wonderful upbringing, seeing the world. I know that some people don't thrive growing up in a military family because you get moved around so much. And some people really do thrive because you get moved around so much and exposed to so much. And we were definitely in the latter category, both myself and my sister. So that led me to ending up in our travels, ending up in Ottawa. That's where I finished up high school. And at that time, wanted to be an attorney. That's kind of a story into itself that goes back to back to a time in Key West, Florida as a little kid. And I saw this guy, Mark, who was in the military in the US, so JAG, and I was 100% sure he was James Bond. And I was telling my parents, James Bond is like right where we are. And they were saying, no, he's a lawyer. And my parents told me from that day on, so we're talking in kindergarten, I would go around telling everyone I was going to be a lawyer. Anyways, I did become a lawyer. I went to law school, University of Ottawa. After a quick undergraduate, I'd say I was in no way, shape, or form a good student in the sense of going to college to learn. I was so laser focused on becoming a lawyer that I went through my undergraduate as fast as I possibly could and got into law school to be a lawyer. Perhaps not surprisingly, once I got into law school, I was a little bit surprised slash disappointed that, oh, that's what a lawyer is?
This isn't James Bond.
No, it was very far from James Bond. But I did, I'd say, through the completion of my legal training, which was going to Bennett Jones in Calgary to article, I realized, well, being a lawyer is not really what it was like in law school. There's lawyers that are business people, there's lawyers that are entrepreneurs, they do all kinds of interesting things and learn a lot of things. And I'd say that was my experience there in the beginning of my career. But that's my personal background. And yes, the James Bond story, that's something I don't typically broadcast because it's not something that I'm especially proud of. That's why I became a lawyer.
Well, it's interesting. It's not related really, but when I was a kid, my parents took me to Frontier Town, which was somewhere in the northern US. It was a town, cowboys and stuff. And I got on the train and we were being robbed by Jesse James. And I'd seen him on TV. This is a town. I'd seen him on TV and I stood up and said, "Can I join your gang, Jesse? Can I come join your gang?" And he says, "Shut up and sit down, kid," he tells me. Because it was all an act, obviously, but I thought it was Jesse James.
Did that break the magic for you, or did that just seem like part of the robbery?
No, I was disheartened the whole time. He didn't let me join his gang, and it wasn't nice to me. I was like 6 or something.
Well, I think it's all worked out better for you. I'm not sure what kind of a train robber you would have made anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you did get to wear masks recently, so that was a good part of it, I guess. So going back to the kid teenager part, were you someone that debated or argued a lot, or did you watch a lot of Perry Mason or LA Law? And most importantly, were you a true Canadian, like skating on like the Rideau Canal or something in Ottawa?
I wish I was that, but something about my parents, who were wonderful parents in all kinds of ways, is that they were very protective of me because as a kid, I was very slight. Like when I went into college, I was the height I am, so like 6'1", and I weighed 135 pounds. So no, seriously, they would not allow me to play hockey because they thought I'd get killed. And they wanted me to do things I didn't want to do, like swim or things like that. So no, I didn't get to be like that. Yes, I'd say when it came to like whatever, watching LA Law, debate, uh, as I said, since I was like sold on being a lawyer back when I was in kindergarten, and from then on was just looking for everything that justified why I wanted to be a lawyer, I was into all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's cool. That's pretty cool. So share with us a little bit about how you navigated that journey from like career and life. Like I never liked the term work-life balance. It was almost like you had to work and then you stopped work for life and then you stopped life to work type of thing. Whereas now we're more into the whole thing. So you had the initial education in law, then you went to MBA,
Mhm.
Alberta, if I'm not
Yep,
mistaken.
that's correct. Yep.
So true Canadian goes to Alberta, I guess. And but then it was a combination of law and economics at U of M, which, by the way, was
Correct.
around the time I actually moved to Miami um, from Winnipeg, because I'd gone to Winnipeg from Montreal at that time. So
I was just going to say from our conversation, I think we may have been in the same place at the same time in
I
Miami.
think so.
Yeah.
What I like to know is I'm only 5'7", and my parents did let me play hockey. So maybe they shouldn't have.
You obviously survived and thrived, so it's okay.
Yeah. So talk about that. How did that happen? Especially going out to Miami and then the law and economics part.
Well, yeah, so this I think had to do with like being convinced that I wanted to be a lawyer before I really knew what a lawyer was. And then being in law school and thinking, I'm not so sure this is exactly what I had in mind. So it was in law school, towards the end of law school, that I thought I actually want to be in business. And I did an MBA.
Hmm.
And pretty much at the same time, because I was going into that Miami program during the summers while I was in law school. So I was doing a master's of law and economics in Miami while I was in law school and planning to go do an MBA afterwards. I put that down to just I was I was for the first time in my life actually broadening my horizons from I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a lawyer. I mean, like this whole James Bond thing just wasn't really supporting the justification for being a lawyer. And I was really in the same way that I'd say I was disappointed with law school, just relative to what my expectations were. Um, I was fascinated with the law and economics program, the master's degree at Miami, which was all about not so much what is the law, but why is the law the way it is.
Hmm.
And their whole theory, the whole school there was about if you understand economics, the efficient allocation of resources, you can predict what the law is without knowing what the law is. And like that to me was so different than
That
law
is.
school. I really like that. And then business, the MBA, Mark, it was brutally hard. I was a classic law student, so not engineer, not so much math, not so much science. In fact, I think I was really on the minimally prepared end. As I told you, I kind of rushed through undergraduate just to get into law school, took the easiest classes to get the highest grades to just like get there. MBA, and by the way, University of Alberta, at least at the time, I don't know now, was a quantitative program. So not like Western that was case study. This was
Right.
quantitative. So I realized I picked like the hardest MBA program that I could do in terms of how they approach MBA. And I really like it. And it sold me on I want to be in business. The funny thing is, I actually only after the MBA went to Bennett Jones because a friend of mine who I was going to go into business with convinced me that before we do that, you should just article. Like, you're not a lawyer. You went to law school, but you're not a lawyer. So just pick a law firm, article, get out, we'll be in business. I went to Bennett Jones, and I'd say the first probably 3 or 4 months, I was the least competitive, least motivated person there. I was doing my time, like just punching the clock. And it took me a few months before I realized this firm is a really special firm. They actually understand business. Their clients are business people. You work with them. You'll learn so much compared to what I knew. I said, I gotta get serious about this. And I like threw myself into this and ended up being there 18 years and getting involved in the management of the firm. And I found Bennett Jones like everything that I had hoped for as a little kid and more when it came to being a lawyer. And it led me, I owe my clean tech entrepreneurial career to Bennett Jones, my time there. It literally physically led me to California. I was working for Bennett Jones. I was a partner there when I first went there to go do legal work. And it happened, if you recall this period of time, that when I went there, which was 2000, Halloween of 2000, this was this really strange intersection of it was the California energy crisis.
Mhm.
So, which is sort of why I was there working for a client of the firm. You know, anytime you have these like cataclysmic events in energy, it may not be very fun for those in the middle of it, but for lawyers, it's a fascinating experience with a lot of work to do.
Right.
But around me was the bursting of the tech bubble. Something like that was another world. Being a lawyer at Bennett Jones in the energy industry, you had like no, or at least I had no exposure to tech, not the people, not the business, not the culture. You drop yourself into Silicon Valley during the bursting of the tech bubble. And my experience was I couldn't possibly have landed there at a better time to be exposed to tech. Had I been there before, well, tech would look easy and everybody's thriving because you could just say, mark.com and you're doing great.
Exactly.
when everything's falling around, and everyone's watching the screens as their stock is tanking, what I found is you learn who are the good people and who are the people that run for the exits when things go bad.
Right.
And those were the people I met. I met the people that dealt with that. I met people, Mark, that thrived in that. Like they embraced the change, the crises, the challenges. And it was then and there that, basically over the next year that I made the decision, I want to be that. I want to be in tech. Logically, given my energy background, I picked clean tech, and that's what I've done since then. But it was that sold me on it, was getting to meet people that were just like the most interesting people I'd ever met in my life, including the passion that they have for changing the world. Again, something that, growing up in traditional energy in Canada, not so much passion to change the world.
No, it's so interesting you say that. And just like a tidbit, one of my best friends in Montreal, we both were looking to go into business and we both ended up at Deloitte first. So it's kind of interesting you say that.
And, a good training ground.
Yeah, it was a good training ground, and I knew I didn't want to do that after a while. I stayed though because one partner, problem is I was really good at accounting and tax and all that crap and all that stuff, I should say. And one partner saw that I was much better in dealing with clients and all sorts of other stuff like that and talent. And so we all have influencers, but I guess that's when what I call the light bulb went off. And I noticed a quote that you had that I wanted to, well, first of all, I wanted to say you were in Canada's energy province. So that's something to recognize. But you said you fell in love with the potential of new technology to change the world and the challenge of making that happen. That sounds like that's what you were talking about. And you're 100% right, where you can really tell who the great people are when it's going bad. Because anybody can have a good attitude when it's going good, and they're all geniuses supposedly, but who can do it when it's not going good, right?
Yeah, I think that's just a generally true statement that in good times when industries are thriving, the economy's good, and if you're in one of those strong industries, yes, everybody seems nice, probably nicer than they really are. Everybody seems to be doing well, probably better than they deserve. Everything seems to be easy, probably
right.
falsely. That's an illusion. And when trouble starts, yeah, I think you pretty soon start to see more the way people really are. I think just going back to that, time of the bursting of the tech bubble, when the trouble is extreme, when the bad times are extreme, then you're really under the microscope. Like you see people like right away. It's not that you need to see this play out. It's like right in your face where people are freaking out, turning each other, or the worst, just they're out. They just head for the exits. Shareholders are left holding the bag. They just, yeah.
Nothing like loyalty.
Yeah.
So I want to switch a little bit, but for many of us, it'd be great if you could share the different types of energy you've been engaged with, because we all hear energy, and we're all smart, semi-educated, whatever type of thing. And can you share some of the energies you've been engaged with, and what it looked like? I know there's can't go into all the details. What it looked like commercializing their use, their viability, and then subsequent to that, can you also say now why you're excited about? Is it Bakken? I always forget. Bakken Energy.
Bakken.
Bakken
Yeah,
Energy.
Bakken Energy. Yeah. Yeah, be happy to. So I guess by way of background to that, my involvement in energy back in the Bennett Jones days was the development of large scale power projects, almost all of which were natural gas. And it ends up being relevant to what I'm actually doing right now. But back in the day, so call it in the leading up to from the 1980s and 90s, early 2000s, this was natural gas, I think, was viewed as a relatively clean fuel, or at least a bridge to cleaner fuels. And I had the benefit of having a very intimate familiarity with natural gas-based energy projects, as well as familiarity with the challenges and complications of large-scale projects, financing, everything goes with it. So call that a good training ground. When I got into clean tech in California, I was drawn, like many people, to renewables generally, solar and wind, but especially energy storage. And the reason I was drawn to energy storage is I saw lots of people doing solar, lots of people doing wind. There was not then, I'm talking about 2000, there was not then like an immediate pressing need for energy storage because there was, relatively speaking, very little solar and wind. It was an emerging trend. Everybody thought there'd be a lot of it. There obviously is now, but there wasn't a big need to deal with the problem with solar and wind, which is the intermittency and the need to balance it. I saw this as a need of the future. I saw this as something that was going to not only be a need, but a really big need, and one that if it didn't deliver would put a ceiling on energy transition. Like the degree to which we would have solar and wind adoption would be limited eventually by energy storage. So I got involved in energy storage of a variety of kinds. Most notably for me was I had a friend, one of these people I met during the crisis time, who was at that time a data center developer, but ended up starting his own startup with some friends. I was just an advisor in the early days. It was a company called Ice Energy, and they were doing thermal energy storage. The idea of storing large amounts of energy, but in a very distributed, each unit very small way. Essentially what they were doing is taking electricity whenever it was abundant, which obviously could include solar, wind, but include anything when times were good and there was lots of electricity on the grid. And then you store it as cooling in ice, and then turn off air conditioners and cool the home, cool the building with ice when electricity is scarce. So not a battery, literally, that it's not taking in electricity and discharging electricity, but by taking in electricity and then providing it back as cooling, so you don't need electricity, it did the job. Company had a very good run. I ended up becoming the CEO of that company. I went from an advisor to general counsel to the CEO. We became the largest thermal energy storage company in the world, got the largest utility contract ever given to a thermal energy storage company. And I enjoyed it. It was a blast, and it certainly was one of the things where you feel really good about what you've done, employed a lot of people. I retired from that in 2018, and that's when I started into this company called Bakken Energy and Clean Hydrogen. And the significance that I saw of hydrogen was, like I think a lot of people in our field of renewable energy, clean energy, I was on the one hand happy, or you could say proud of the achievements of the industry in terms of advancing solar, advancing wind, and now advancing energy storage.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I was becoming very aware that none of this was happening big enough and fast enough for what we need to do to battle climate change. And that if you believe in that, if you think that this is something that has to be done, it's not going to happen in the time frame we need it to happen, mostly because solar, wind, and batteries, while they can do a lot, essentially just jumps over and leaves behind big parts of the economy that are the biggest polluters. Heavy transportation, long haul trucks, shipping, trains, aviation. These are things where I'd say there's experimentation in the idea of batteries. At the end of the day, whether you're talking about long haul trucks, you're talking about aviation, the weight of batteries, the size of batteries, the degradation of batteries, the charging time of batteries, all make these things what they are, which is sort of experiments and pilots that aren't really going anywhere. And the result is what you see around us. You see diesel burning trucks everywhere. Biggest source of pollution in the transportation sector. You see all these, and there's a long list of these where I'd say the worst polluting parts of the economy are getting left behind to continue to pollute. And it doesn't add up unless you decarbonize those, in addition to doing solar, wind, and batteries. Unless you decarbonize those areas, which are very difficult to decarbonize, but unless you do it, you don't get where we need to get. And right now, there's only one tool to decarbonize, and it's hydrogen. That's why I became interested in it. My specific interest was, while you can decarbonize with hydrogen, and while hydrogen is everywhere, it's the most ubiquitous element, it's not naturally available. You have to extract it from where it is.
Right.
And that's energy intensive and it's expensive. So my focus of our company, Bakken Energy, was how do you do this in a low cost way that's clean, so low carbon hydrogen, but make it affordable? Because if it's just something that, yes, theoretically I could decarbonize trucking and shipping and trains and planes with hydrogen, but if it's gonna be 10x the cost of diesel and jet fuel, that's not gonna happen.
Sure.
So you need innovation, you need a transformation of this. At Bakken Energy, our approach, which is different from other companies in the business that are looking at other ways of doing clean hydrogen, we're exclusively focused on make it affordable, make it the lowest cost. Today, the lowest cost way you can do it is you take natural gas, you put it through some type of reforming process. We use the most advanced called autothermal reforming. You get out of it pure hydrogen, but you also get CO2 emissions. They come from the process. Right. So you capture those. That's what happens with autothermal reforming. It captures about 96% of the emissions. So it's not zero emission, but it's pretty close. And the result is hydrogen at a cost that's about a quarter of the next best alternative. So we're doing low cost and then large scale. The added benefit of what we're doing is the actual projects are in North Dakota. North Dakota is an anomaly in that it produces a lot of gas that has nothing to do with. It's associated gas, comes with the oil. They want the oil. They don't want the gas. They don't use natural gas in North Dakota. So they move what they can out, but huge volumes, like truly huge volumes of natural gas, are flared.
Wow.
And of all the things that you could do with natural gas, I think common sense would tell you, Mark, the worst thing you could possibly do would just be light it, let it rip. So our focus is not just using natural gas as the feedstock for our process, but use natural gas that was being flared. So we're delivering the benefit of not just low cost hydrogen, not just hydrogen that's low carbon, but we're stopping the flaring of natural gas, which is the largest source of pollution in that state.
That's significant.
Yeah. And our market is trucking. So we are partnered with Pilot Flying J, the truck stop company, with Cummins, the diesel engine manufacturer, who now makes fuel cells and diesel engines being converted to hydrogen combustion engines.
Awesome.
Schneider, the truck fleet. And I would say it's hard work, mentally, it's hard work to figure out not just how to produce the hydrogen, but it's actually much harder to figure out how do you get it from where we produce it to where they need it.
Right.
There's options are trucks, cryogenic trucks, trains, working on pipeline ideas. I'll just say it's a fascinating field. It's really important work, and it's real satisfying work.
No, that's actually spectacular. You made the full circle, natural gas to natural gas.
Yeah.
So that's amazing.
I would have never predicted that, because when I left Bennett Jones and that kind of thing, I was never thinking I'd have anything to do with natural gas again, but there you go.
No, how could you have? It's actually quite incredible. I know Dakota had obviously a big surge in economics when they found the oil there and all that stuff. But that's surprising that they just couldn't do anything with the natural gas. You would have thought there's something they could have done. So I'm glad that you guys are doing that.
I was obviously surprised myself. When I started up this venture with my partners who are investment bankers, they were really the ones who were like pointing me to North Dakota and saying, look, what's going on there? Can't we do something with that? And I was surprised. All I knew was North Dakota had gone from a pretty sleepy agrarian state to all of a sudden with fracking, they're an oil producer, not just a little oil producer, a big oil producer. And I think that's the main reason, if you're trying to figure out like why are they doing that, why are they flaring all this gas, I think it was because oil came on so big, so fast, in a very remote part. We're not talking Texas where you've got the major oil and gas companies. These were kind of wildcatters. Yeah. They get oil, they're happy, everybody's happy for them. There's all this natural gas coming with it, and as everybody I think knows, unlike oil, where if you have oil, put it in a truck and take it where you want. Natural gas is not that. Natural gas requires years of planning of natural gas pipelines, storage facilities, infrastructure. And for whatever reason, it never caught up to this booming oil. But we'll take it all.
Oh yeah, man, I remember when they got the oil and there wasn't enough homes for people. They're coming up there for jobs, so people are staying in their RVs. They're staying in all sorts of stuff in North Dakota. It was like the wild, the gold rush or something.
It's very analogous to what happened in Alberta and Fort McMurray when all of a sudden you couldn't. I think people were living in trailers. There were no houses available.
Well, I actually just saw a movie. Not to get too off track here. It's a Danish movie in English, and they found oil in Greenland, which is effectively owned, controlled, whatever, by Denmark. And there was a whole thing about do they do the oil? Do they extract the oil and make a ton of money? But that's not really what Denmark was all about, doing that. And so it was like, holy cow, they make all this money or not. And I wonder if what would have happened if that would have been a place also for natural gas from producing oil in Greenland, and they ended up working it out to do it cleanly, but it might be worth investigating actually.
Yeah, I have not heard that story. That's quite intriguing.
It's a movie it's spelled Borgen, Borgen, but it's pronounced Born. One of my sons is married to a Danish girl, and ever since then I'm Denmark all over the place. And it's on Netflix, I think, Borgen, and fascinating story. So.
I will check it out. Although I'm not super excited, Mark, about going to Greenland.
Well, Greenland and Iceland have always been needing to change their names back and forth because it doesn't make any sense. But that's also another story. So I did want to ask you, with Fifth Element Group, we were launched about 4.5 years ago at the UN headquarters as an impact consultancy, and won't get into all of it today. But we were launched with the premise that business and business leaders can do way better when they're doing good, basically. And part of why we trademarked the term leaders who care was about that's who gets the best talent, because of leaders who care about them. And so in other words, you got to balance the economic, the social, environmental impact, and you can actually do better. What words of wisdom would offer a CEO or a founder, up and coming leaders, and it really goes across all types of businesses, where they have the responsibilities for all types of stakeholders also, how to manage their organizations, their companies, where you can make a better economic impact when you're making a social, environmental impact at the same time?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I think we live in interesting times when it comes to this issue, because in the past, I would have said it would have been fair to say, how do you balance economics and social, environmental? I don't see really any challenge in balancing this in the times we live, because previously, I think you already had this issue that you brought up of talent. Young people did not, I don't know when it started, but it's been going on for a while. Young people don't want to go and work just for money. They want a job where they feel they're doing good. And I think that for some, maybe just saying you're doing good and having a marketing approach to it will work. But I think for sure, for most people, they're plenty sophisticated enough to know, is a company, is a business really doing good in the world? And if they're not, you're not attracting the best people, and the people there just aren't going to be as excited about what they do. So we already had that. So you had an incentive economically in terms of talent to not just be making money, but be doing good. What's changed, and it's changed in a huge way, and I think it is unprecedented. I don't know that we'll ever see it again in our lifetime, but right now, at least here in the United States, I can't comment about Canada because I'm not current enough, but in the United States, in the energy field, all of the money is going into clean energy, climate change. The financial support, direct financial support of businesses doing clean energy is unlike anything that's ever been seen before. It dwarfs what was done for solar. It dwarfs what was done for wind in the past. It's grants, it's production tax credits, it's investment tax credits. It does turbocharge solar and wind. It all of a sudden is turbocharging batteries, energy storage, hydrogen, unbelievable amounts of money that are going into support hydrogen. So by doing good in energy, you are being heavily, heavily rewarded, or at least you have the opportunity to be heavily rewarded by government funding. Private investors now, I think, are quite explicitly saying it is not enough for us to invest if all you're telling me is you'll make me money. I want to see you're doing good. And again, I'm sure there are some that are sort of saying that as window dressing, but my own experience is it's not window dressing. From the very largest investors like a BlackRock down to venture capital firms, this is the way of the world now. And that's why I think, it's, you could almost tell a business person, if you don't get that, you're like really missing the boat. If you're not out to do good, you are not going to make a lot of money. You will not get the best talent. You will not be getting government money that others are getting. You will not be getting private capital that others are getting. Or at least the private capital you get will be the most expensive. In the same way that the ESG investors, if you can get them, that's low cost capital. If you can get federal government money, well, that's the lowest cost
It
capital.
is. Exactly.
So I just think you have every reason to do good in this area. And as I said before, I've never seen it. Um, we're just living in what I think is the most exciting time in energy, certainly in my lifetime, like in my career. This is the most exciting time I've ever seen, where the world is changing in radical ways, I believe, for the good. And I believe it's important. I'm happy to be a part of it. And I'm really excited and energized that it appeals to a huge number of young people. Like, they understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
They want to be a part of it. And that's great.
It is great, and it almost goes back to community. What we're supposed to be doing in the first place is making our communities better, and so on. So a lot of work to still do. There are still some greenwashers, white, whatever you want to call them,
Of
and
course.
that say they believe in it but not. But younger people, I think every generation wants to do something different, but I think the younger generation now is seeing the urgency, and they're really going for it. So another point of doing good and important work. I know you got a personal reason why you've been doing so much amazing work with JDRF, juvenile diabetes, and I wanted you to just share about that, and why you're doing it.
Well, the why is easy. My wife was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes 35 years ago, which, without disclosing age, is very late in life for juvenile diabetes. It's typically, very young, could be babies, young children, why they call it juvenile diabetes. But the reality is there have been cases, I think they may have increased over time, of older adults getting juvenile diabetes, meaning type 1, where your pancreas is shot. It's not a case where you're insensitive to insulin like type 2. It's just you've lost the ability to produce insulin. So when she was diagnosed, I'd say within the first 30 days of her diagnosis, like lots of people, typically they would be parents, but in my case, I was a spouse, like, you just want to know anything and everything that you can do to help. And in my case, I was interested obviously in care and management, but I was really interested in how do we cure this disease? Because the more you learn about it, the less you like it. I think, like a lot of people, I was so naive that when my wife called me to say that she had just been diagnosed with juvenile diabetes, I was thinking, oh, so you won't get to eat sugar anymore. I really thought, like, that's the consequence of it. So you're going to eat unsweetened things. It was only as you sit down with a doctor and learn about the complications, and I won't get into that, but it's as serious as anything can possibly be. But you can minimize the risks of that, and you can definitely work in a cure. And that's what GDRF was about and still is about. My involvement with them, it started local at the Calgary chapter, then I joined the national board, then I joined the international board, and I continue to be say active, but nothing like I used to be. There was a time, I was recently talking to my wife about this, there was a time when I was at Bennett Jones that it would have been at least a day a week of my time. At least a day a week. Like, I was...
What's important?
Yeah, it's an easy thing to get totally swept up, and when it's your loved one, their life's in danger, and you're working with others that have the same passion and drive. So raised a lot of money, worked, lots of frustration because there were all these pathways to a cure, and you keep coming to either a dead end or a disappointing end, and you adjust and move on. They're doing great work. I think that the most important work that has been achieved at JDRF is they have done an amazing job at kind of shifting from, let's try this miracle cure or that miracle cure, and going to, how about while we work on a miracle cure, we create basically a bionic pancreas, an artificial pancreas. And then an equally great job at making that accessible to everybody, working with insurance companies, working with government, so that if you want a continuous glucose monitor, an insulin pump, And therefore you put those two together and you basically have a artificial pancreas and normalized blood sugar. And that's the best defense you've got to complications of diabetes, is just having normal blood sugar all the time, even though it's artificial. Um, that's what they've done. It's an amazing group of people. I think,
I bet.
yeah.
No, good for
But
you.
but but I have backed off over time just because it exhausts you.
Sure.
And I think anybody that's involved in a health charity can relate to that. That the same passion that brings you to it and drives you, if you don't kind of back off a little bit over time, it just burns you out.
Well, not to be cute, but it sucks the energy out of you after a while.
It does, and you need the right answers. I think what I've done, which is you make room for others, you help others when called upon,
Right.
but you can't. I couldn't possibly be doing that like one day a week, every day of my life, because it's too much.
Yeah, and initially when it's so personal, you're willing to almost give up everything.
Yes, you are.
So
yeah,
that's what you do. So
you absolutely are.
Well, all the best to your wife, and because there's a lot of people with JD and that out there, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal. So, we're all hoping with technology and whatnot and everything research that's something that's done with that and others. I got one last question to ask you on this part. In 2021, one of my clients told me, he said, Mark, the year 2020, it was the year that flew by slowly. And I thought, what a great line. and it did. It feels like yesterday and a long time ago, all at the same time. So with everything that's happened over the last few years, what are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
Well, it was without a doubt a strange time we've gone through. For me, we were probably ideally situated, Mark, when the pandemic hit. We were living on our ranch outside of Santa Barbara. You're by definition isolated. You're by definition quite self-sufficient. You're by definition a prepper, not because we were classic preppers, but because you live on a ranch in a remote area and you have a bunch of stuff stored away. So, and we were certainly not claustrophobic like people that were stuck in apartments, like we could walk around on our own land. So I'd say we were ideally situated. Again, just sticking with my personal experience, I had at that time already been working remotely for many, many years. Right. I was good at it. I was used to it. If anything, I'd say I sometimes had to be a bit careful and sensitive to the fact that, well, I'm working from home and all these people are in offices, and then all of a sudden everybody's working from home. and I saw firsthand, including friends, that for some of them, this idea of you're not in an office, you're working from home, you're not traveling, you're always in the same place, was extremely negative, like very disruptive. For me, it was like,
me too.
Well, I'm already at home and now I just don't need to travel. Now, obviously, I was extremely aware of the fact that apart from people liking being at home, not liking being at home, that people dying, it was scary as anything. One of my takeaways from this was, as scary as it was, and it was scary and it's not gone, but people are resilient. Like, we fought back from that. On the business side, which I think I'm best qualified to talk about, just from a business perspective, I was impressed. I don't know your thoughts on how resilient businesses were to this, how quickly they adapted to really crazy constraints, changes, everything had changed, and things got done. Going back to my own businesses, it had no impact whatsoever in terms of us getting things done. The people that we worked with in other companies, I think all were like reacting like we were, which is, well, we can't do this and we can't do this, but we have to get this stuff done. So let's work around it and get it done. And yes, it might have been nice, or we thought essential to be face-to-face in person. Well, we're not doing that. So what can we do? And really looking back, I would say we just got like really efficient. You're working with other people that want to get things done. And for us, it was good. At the same time, just, living on our ranch, I saw around us small businesses getting wiped out, restaurants getting wiped. Like, it was a terrible time, any way you want to look at it. Um, I guess I'm just making the point that many businesses had the advantages that allowed them to adapt and carry on. New businesses were created, and we got through it. Yeah.
Yeah, you look back in history, a lot of new amazing businesses are usually created during times like those, which goes full circle to what you said at the beginning about you can tell who's really good when things are going bad.
That was bad. and
Yeah.
and I had the same early experiences that I expect you did, and probably everybody did, where the scariest time was when I didn't know what this is about. I didn't know how bad this was going to be.
Yeah.
It was the experience of like thinking I better go out and go to the grocery store and
Get toilet paper.
Yes, and the store looks like it's ransacked, and I'm wearing a mask and gloves and thinking this is
It was good camouflage for the real bank robbers.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but it was a truly crazy time. I never imagined that we'd go through something like that. Just truly like apocalyptic, and I'll always remember it. I guess the positive, it was an experience. I wouldn't want others to have it, but lived through it and survived.
from breakdown comes opportunity, hopefully, and that's where we're at. So thank you so much for sharing all that and being on the Leaders Who Care series. And I mean, because you pretty well are a leader who cares, in many ways. And so we appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Wonderful. Love to do it again.